here with our agenda items. If you're just walking in, we do have a sign-in sheet. If you want to get on the way out, that's fine as well. It's just up on Adrian Gill's desk right there on your way out, so we can keep track of attendance. That'd be great. Please note the chat is disabled on the Zoom, so your comments should be made vocally tonight. And if you're here in person, we have a live mic at the podium for you to make comments, because that is the focus of our meeting tonight. So before we dive into the meat of the agenda, let's go through commissioner introductions. And my name is Lincoln Frasca. I'm a Parks Commissioner.
Emily Donaldson, also a Parks Commissioner.
Andrew Brewer, Parks Commissioner.
Stephanie Hunt, Parks Commissioner, joining on Zoom.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Park staff, we have
Alec Ellsworth,
Parks Director.
Oh, I should be. Sorry.
Okay, excellent. The next is we will need a motion to approve tonight's agenda, April 9th, as well as the April 2nd minutes.
Moved.
Okay, Andrew Brewer with the motion and
Second.
Emily with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, hear an opposition from a non-commissioner on that. Well, if all the commissioners approve the minutes and the agenda, that motion is going to carry. And we are speeding along here to review the proposed changes to the dog rules in Hubbard Park. So I've prepared a bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to open it up to you all, because that's really why we're here tonight. But I first would like to start by addressing the energy around the topic of leashing dogs in Hubbard Park. This isn't a new problem. This isn't, something that has just come up in the last couple of weeks or couple months or couple of years even. This is a decades-old issue. And this commission, we're short Kasha tonight, our chair, unfortunately, but this commission, including Kasha, has been engaged with the issue of off-leash or leashing in the park for the last couple of years, since we started the management plan process and ran some surveys acknowledging the folks who weren't visiting the park because of off-leash dogs. That came to my attention about a couple of years ago. In the past year, we assembled a dog committee, and they have been forefront on this issue and leading the way with surveys and public outreach. So I'd like to thank their work, because what they've done in this, in their outreach efforts and the information and reports and surveys they've released is the reason we are here today with as much information we have and with as much public input and participation as we have. I see 27 people on the chat here and about a dozen in the room. So I would like to credit the dog committee for getting the word out. The next thing I want to say is that although we definitely do not have a consensus and likely never will on this issue, everybody is working towards a solution that highlights simplicity, complicity, and enforceability. Those are words I heard from the dog committee last meeting on April 9th, and I fully support, and I think everybody in this room can agree that that's what we're here to do. We want to find something that works for the greatest amount of people and is simple and is easy to follow and is easy to enforce from a park staff and from a community and neighbor perspective. Next, I want to thank our park staff. Their professional recommendation that we'll be addressing tonight reflects institutional knowledge that is valued across the community and highly regarded across this commission. I'd like to thank the community, everybody in this room, everybody on the Zoom, for showing up tonight as well as last week and helping us slow this process down and increasing the public participation and increasing the amount that you all are able to help steer the ship of the parks in Montpelier, and helping us to realize that we needed to pause and not vote at last week's special meeting. And we're here tonight not to make a vote or make any decision, but to hear from you all to inform our next hearing and final vote on May 7th. Moving on to the original proposal by the dog committee. This proposal, which is outlined and commented on the update on the Hubbard Park dog policy, This proposal focused on a 2 to 4 p.m. leashing rule across Hubbard Park, and was ultimately something that the commission couldn't accept based on the fact that we all agreed it didn't adequately address the equitable goals that we were trying to create more of an equitable park in Hubbard Park, more of a welcoming space. So tonight, we're here to hear feedback on the park's update on the Hubbard Park dog policy. That was the commissioner's response to the park staff professional recommendation, as well as the dog committee's initial recommendation. Again, we will be making no decisions tonight, and nothing will be voted on until the 7th of May. So the park's professional recommendation has 2 major points. And the first option there would be to leash all of the core or southern area of Hubbard Park. You can think roughly of where the parks director, the house sits right now, down through the parking areas and all the shelters. That's the core area. That's about 100 acres. And then the next part of that recommendation would be to keep off leash all the time the northern half, about 150 acres of Hubbard Park. The other point that the commission is considering is modifying this zone boundary to allow for more off-leash access, potentially beginning the off-leash and on-leash boundary between the 2 shelters, the old and the new shelter, in a field, which many people see or feel today is an off-leash dog field, but is also additional parking and would allow for easier access to off-leash space if the zone solution was there. The next part of this alternative plan would be to introduce introduce a time constraint where there would be certain times of the day where there could be off-leash access to the core area. For example, in New York City Central Park, they have off-leash in the entire park until 9 a.m., and then the entire park is leashed until 9 p.m. So that's really what we're doing here today. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear directed comments about what I just outlined, those bullets, which are the parks, which is the professional recommendation that we're all considering. And before I pass it on, I want to see if there's anything that other commissioners or park staff want to add to what I just said. Okay, well, with that, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, 6:08. We have until 7 p.m. to hear from as many people that would like to speak. And I want to keep about a 2-minute cap on comments so we can hear from the most people as possible. So please be respectful. Please be listening actively. We want to hear support for others' ideas, but we don't need to hear ideas again and again. Everything is being recorded tonight, and all the emails people have been sending are also being recorded and compiled. I apologize if you haven't had a response yet. We are reading and receiving those comments and really do appreciate them. So with that, if there's a representative from the dog committee that would like to speak, I'd like to offer them the opportunity to speak to the memo that was released earlier today and begin the public comment period. Okay.
Can we just pause before? I think there's something in the chat about folks can't hear on Zoom, and I just want to make sure we clear that up.
I am able to hear, and I'm on Zoom.
And I'm just going to go ahead and mute everybody and then unmute the council chamber. Is that what you need in order to council chamber? Just because I think there's quite a few people that are not muted right now. All right, mute.
I can't hear you.
Your opening statement.
All right.
We may need to repeat.
I think some of them did,
Okay.
but maybe not all of them.
Yeah, and we'll make the recording available as soon as we can if you did miss the intro. but I'm going to hand it over now.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself, and then, yeah.
Great. I'm Dana Dwinelli-Yardley. I'm one of the members of the dog committee. I live here in Montpelier. The other three members of the committee are in the room, Jessa, Diana, and Robin, and I so appreciate working with these three folks. We had a short window of time between last week and this week. We're gathered again in just 7 days. So that was not enough time for us to go through a full consensus process and come up with another alternate proposal for you all, but we did meet several times and had some really sort of engaging, wrestling, deep conversations about this issue, which is so big and complex and wrestly for many people. We have a memo that's in the back of the room. If you're here, you can grab it. It's also on the Parks Commission website. I encourage you to look at it. And I'm just going to give a quick summary of what's in there in hopefully like 2 minutes, and then we can hear from people, which is really what we're here to do. One of the main things we did call out in this memo is about public process. And I really want to thank you all for slowing it down and thanking the people last week who spoke up to slow it down. We really, one of the sort of guiding principles I think about decision making is that it kind of, what the decision is matters less than the process. And if people feel heard, listened to, like they were treated fairly, like they had a chance to share their views, they're going to be more likely to be okay with whatever the final decision is. And there's been some challenges to the process for us in this dog committee and Parks Commission process. We've had some support at sometimes, less support at other times. Deadlines have been communicated in a pretty rushed fashion. We haven't had totally clear communication from the Parks Commission on what our role should be and what we should be doing. And that's been frustrating and hard. And we all care a bunch about this issue, so we're still here doing the work and feel really grateful that the dialogue has opened up a lot in the last week, partly from last meeting, and we're in more communication. We wish that had happened 4 or 5 months ago. So happy to speak with you more personally about that feedback, but just wanted to say out loud that we really are here to champion the public process and the public input. And we want to make as much space as possible for as many people in Montpelier to weigh in on this. I know you have been talking about it for years and years, fully aware, but we're sort of coming to a head on this crucial decision. And like, this is, again, that moment for people to feel heard and listened to. So thank you for doing that. I hope you continue to do that. And I want everybody who's listening to know that the dog committee is also receiving your written feedback. Members of the Parks Commission are kindly forwarding all of those emails to us, and we're reading them. So I want you to know that you have at least 9 listening ears on your feedback who are, we're at least in an advisory role of suggesting things to you all. So you should know that. We have some specific thoughts about this proposal to split the park into 2 zones, and they're mostly around accessibility of the northern section, steepness of trails, are they actually walkable by folks of lots of mobility levels, parking and access are, what happens in mud season when a lot of the parking lots are closed, are people able to access the park in points that they can access both north and south. And also just other amenities in the northern section, which is more rugged, more wild. We really encourage the Parks Commission to look at this holistically and not just make a dog decision, but say, okay, if we make this decision, then what maintenance things flow from that? Let's make a full plan to support users of the park going forward. Would be a massive change. So let's look at the infrastructure of the park and make sure it works for people and that there's a clear, speedy, concrete plan to address that. And I think the last thing I just want to leave you all with in this room and the people listening is just some of our big picture thoughts that sort of came up, those questions that don't necessarily have one right answer, but are worth chewing on in a decision of this magnitude. And I'm just going to read the top level of that from our memo. And you can read more if you want, but as you speak, think about these things. Whose voices are not being heard in this process? What is the difference between harm and inconvenience? How do our overlapping identities inform our park use, and how do we balance the varied needs that come with that? What are we willing to give up to ensure that all members of our community have safe access to Hubbard Park? And how can the park be made safer and more accessible for everyone? Let the discussion begin.
Thank you, Dana. So you can use the raise hand function in person or online. It works in both spaces. Okay, yeah, please.
Hello, I'm Rob Hitzig, and let me just start off by saying I appreciate your efforts on this very difficult issue. I understand it's been going on for a long time, and it's not an easy one to tackle. First, with the proposals, I thought the idea of emulating Central Park in New York was a good one, in that if New York could do it, I think Montpelier could handle it with 9:30 being a cutoff, or perhaps that could be changed a little bit here and there. But that sounds like a very good proposal. The big problem I have with the proposal that I saw online or on the sheets was that there isn't a corridor to get to the north section. And there are several trails in the southern section that aren't widely used that probably could be used for a corridor if we were going to go that way. And the big problem being without a corridor and without parking access is that by the time you get to that section, if you're just going for a moderate short hike, you're going to have to turn around immediately. So there's not really going to be access for off leash. And I really don't want to I don't think we want to encourage the need for driving to get to the north section. So I think that's worth considering. So if you want recommendations in terms of what trails might be used for using as corridors, I think the natural area trail, maybe the ravine trail, those are very, they're not used much at all. And also the trail that's behind the manager's house, the one that goes from the ballpark all the way around, that's also a potential corridor trail.
Just to be clear, when you say corridor trail, Rob, you're talking about an off-leash trail that would lead to the greater off-leash area.
Right. If you're going to go that direction, that it'd be great to have some way to get over there from the south end.
If somebody's walking like from the meadow or from.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
They don't have to have a leash, and they have to have
and
a
they
car.
could get to the bigger section without being on leash. And the big problem, one of the big problems with not just dog exercise, but the dogs on leash are often more problematic meeting each other than off leash. So it'd be great to be able to get to that section off leash. That's my thought. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple hands online. I'm sorry, I don't know who was first, but we're gonna go with David Dobbs. And David, we can't hear you.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And thanks to everybody involved that's been working on this. I know it's not the funnest thing to do. And this has been going on a long time. I am really encouraged to see the current proposal from that the commission's backing about this 2-area solution. I think it has the chance to put this issue to rest after years of corrosive dispute and so on. And its beauty is its simplicity and its equity. The park is divided roughly in half, actually 60-40. As Alex's proposal originally said, this gives anyone who wants to go to the park, whether they're both people who don't want off-leash dogs and those who don't mind, can go there at any time. Am I done talking? This is what it's okay. Good. No, the little thing. So I think those are great assets to this thing. What I am worried about is the suggestion that there be a time exception to, that suspends the on-leash zone and turns it into an off-leash zone. I don't see the reason for this. And I don't see the logic of having there be the proposal creates equity. Equity should be the goal. This constraint, this removal of the on-leash only status in one half of the park compromises that equity. There, you will find no time of day where I, for instance, would be happy with that exception to the rule. The morning is kited partly because some parks do this. I don't think that's a good time. That's unfair to people whose only time to get exercise in the park is in the morning, or who need early light for their mental health, or that want to go there and bird watch without the disturbances that dogs sometimes bring. I beg you not to water down the equity of this thing. You have a great, simple solution, and it will be compromised if you start fiddling with it and making exceptions.
Thank you, David.
That's all I got to say. Thanks, everyone, for your work. It's a big thing, and I'm impressed.
Thank you. Your comments are noted. Okay, back to the room. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Yes, please, go ahead.
John Jose and Barry Street. Again, I also want to thank everybody who's been a part of this process and brought it this far. I really appreciate it. Reflecting back to the original work that was done by the consultant, I think it was maybe a couple of years ago now, I really thought that work was done on a good scientific analysis with input from everybody. And I was actually very much in favor of what was originally proposed in that proposal. And to me, it's been disappointing that that proposal was not adopted and this process has had to drag on for so long. So the fact that this recommendation from the parks at least partially reflects that proposal, that at least some of the park would be off leash, I'm very much in favor of this. And as Mr. Dobbs stated, I'm also against the idea that there be any modifications made to the proposal as it is now. If anything, I'd like to see a larger area of the park extending up into a portion of the northern section to be off leash. So I'd like the recommendation as it is now, if anything, to stay as it is. One thing I think it's important to remember is that this park is a multi-use facility. Dog walking is only one component of it, one use of it. There are many other uses that some of which have been mentioned already tonight. I think that's really important to keep in mind. One thing I think that's forgotten sometimes, it's recognized in North Branch Park, the value of the wildlife we have there in the leash law. The wildlife in Hubbard Park is no less valuable, and it deserves all the protection it can get. And when you consider the impacts to large and small animals of dogs running off leash, ground nesting birds, the more protection they can get, the better. And yeah, I think this is a long running divisive problem, as has been stated tonight. And I absolutely endorse what Parks is proposing. And like I said, if anything, I would be in favor of the area being expanded slightly northward.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going back into the Zoom room. And Bronwyn, I'd seen you were trying to raise your hand earlier, so I think you're next. You are still muted though, so you do have to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Again.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this. I'm a great user of the park, really enjoy the park along with my husband and my dog. And it's been my observation that most of the dogs that I've ever seen in the park are pretty well under control. And so I'm a fan of, preserving what access we can to the park. I agree that access from the northern part is difficult. Also, having walked in that area, it's not very friendly to walk in, especially for people with mobility issues, etc. So if we're going to talk about, making things equal, it would be nice if we could all walk on, say, even pavement or something like that, because some of us are older, but we also have dogs. I have observed that there are owners whose dogs are not under voice control. What we do with our dog is if our dog is off leash and we see somebody coming, we'll put him on leash, unless we know the people and the dog. My question really is about enforcing any of this. So, I would like to see some hours given to off leash. I think that's a sensible thing to do. And like the certain times of day, I'd like to see the corridor where the dogs in the parking areas around the new shelter and up around what we call the dog park. I'd like to see that remain open for access, but understanding that, I mean, I think there was some talk about a fencing area of the upper part. I don't know what happened to that. But my real question is about who's going to enforce any of this? The town doesn't have the money. What are we going to do? Are we going to put police up there? If we're talking about social control, I don't know what that means. Does that mean you can be nasty to somebody who has a dog off leash and vice versa? So that bothers me a bit. But at any rate, I think it's very important to be equitable in our decisions. If we can, I would really like to say if there are certain times of day that can be off leash and certain areas of the park that are not as inaccessible as the northern area, that would be something I'd like to see. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay. Going once in the room.
I'll do the room.
Okay, please.
Thanks. Justin Colber. Thanks everyone for considering this. I support the corridor approach. I also do support a time approach. I think that would be more equitable. I would suggest 8 to 12 or 9 to 1 or something in that range that gives some morning hours for dog walking. I do appreciate how Lincoln said we're trying to find something for the greatest amount of people, knowing we can't get to everyone. And I think that comes from the survey. A lot of hard work went into the survey. I would like to see the survey incorporated. And I know the survey found that 31% of people wanted leashing at all times. So the top choice was actually more enforcement at 46%. But in any event, only 31% said they wanted leashing. And at that time, it was the core main park. There wasn't a north-south split for the survey. And I'm someone who wants more enforcement. I want to be clear about that too. And the survey also found that there was, quote, a rough split between no change in the current system and more changes. And I'm someone who wants more changes. We need, better systems and better enforcement. So I agree with that. But if we have a rough split, I agree, let's split the park. So that's splitting the park both space and time. And the current staff proposal of just geography, I don't think provides equity. And I love how Dana reminded us about harm versus inconvenience. I worry that could there be harm to people who can't reach the north if you stick to just the geographical split versus just inconvenience? And I also appreciated, I think it was David's comment about equity. So I'm proposing equity of inconvenience. Here's a true compromise. And I shared this with Alec. I'll be very frank. Alec and I talked. He said he did a good job with the compromise because he made everyone unhappy. I said, I disagree. I think the 31% who wanted unleash are very happy, but I think the rest is not sharing the same burden. So here's what a time split will give you. You're going to get 4 quadrants of grumbling. You're going to get, I want to walk my dog in the morning. I want to walk my dog in the afternoon. I want a picnic in the morning. I want a picnic in the afternoon. Everyone's going to grumble about some inconvenience because we're all sharing the resource equally. That's what a time split would do. Equity of inconvenience. That would be true compromise. I think that's shown on the survey. I think a time split is what is needed for equity. And I know, Alec, you wrote in your report that a time split wouldn't work because, quote, the most basic tenet of a park is to be there when you need it. I agree. And I know that the dog committee's recommendation from 2 to 4 p.m. of off leash was too narrow of a time. Yeah, that was only a 2-hour window. But to swing the other way and to ban dogs for 24 hours a day and give 0 hours, that to me is going too far. So let's split the park, geography and time.
Can I just ask one follow-up
Yeah,
question,
please.
Justin? Because it came up in a comment too. What would more enforcement look like to you?
Signage, and then when I'm walking my dog out there with my dog Tybee, I will make sure that if someone's beyond the time zone, I will say, we have the canine code of conduct. Can you please adhere to it? And I would be like the personal, dog person. I'd be happy to wear like a blue ribbon. I'd say, hey, some of us are on the dog enforcement committee. We're here to make sure that we all follow this park, so we preserve this resource that we can all use. It can be a volunteer system, and I'll be the first to spearhead it and to check in with Alec and anyone else on things like that.
So like a committee like similar to what we have, but for enforcement and implementation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to be in touch with all of you on how to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Alec.
Thank you, Justin. Amelia Vath.
Hey there. This is actually Rose. My wife is also wanting to speak later. I am the chair of the Conservation Commission, and I will say, like, before I make any remarks, that the Conservation Commission was not brought into this conversation in any capacity, and so I'm not making any remarks on behalf of the Conservation Commission because we've not had any opportunity to discuss it as a whole. So any comments further are just my own. But I do want to say, just from that mindset, I feel like as the chair, I have some responsibility to advocate for this, just so that it's the most informed discussion possible. So, there is a tool called Vermont Conservation Design where the state DNR has prioritized areas for habitat connectivity, surface water quality, physical landscape diversity, essentially areas that are the most important places for continued, connectivity and ecological value. The northern part of the park that is being proposed as off leash has the only block within the park that is identified as high quality or high priority for the state. Not that this is for or against dogs. I want to be very clear that I'm not speaking in this regard. But I do think that introducing more off-leash traffic and just traffic in general, I think we can all agree that, this is going to increase a lot of traffic in the northern part of the park. That is going to incentivize long-term, more trails, more development in that northern part of the park. And I think given its potential for being priority habitat within the park that the state has identified, I really do think that there needs to be a more thoughtful approach to this, because I just worry that we're going to introduce a decision here that really increases the park's usage throughout, which is great in one way. But I think being mindful of how that increased use is ultimately going to result in additional development. Even in the proposals that were sent out, it did say, we could build a more accessible trail. We could do these things. There are a lot of different ecological values that northern part provide. And, right now it just is not as much use. So it's providing obviously more of that value because there is less people going there. It's more of an opportunity for, potential wildlife for these riparian areas to not get worn down by dogs. That's something we've done on the commission before, is the fencing in the vernal pools in the southern part of the park. And we're not funded, right? We got zeroed out. So I think that there's a lot here that's we could do these things, which I'm not for or against. I'm not speaking to that today. I do feel it's important to maintain my role as chair there. But I do think this is not a one single decision. This is going to have long-term impacts on the landscape of the northern part of the park, and is how do we protect the resources there? So that's my comment. It's not really one way or the other. It's just one of those things that I hope that you all consider. And I think it'd be good for the commission, for the Conservation Commission to be like a space for that more style of conversation around this rather than, you know, like dog access, you know? So yeah, thank you.
Point well taken, Rose. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna keep getting these hands in the Zoom room if it's quiet here still. All right, Rebecca Bluen.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for hearing me, Rebecca Bluen, on Bailey Ave. So I bought the park. Just the comment I wanted to make is I looked at the new proposal, the area proposal today, and was like, oh, okay, we divided half and half. We did with respect to acreage, but when you look at length of trail, if you take out the nature center trail, which is not a well-marked trail, nor is it a round trip trail, there's not an equal level or equal length of trail that I can see in both parts. So I feel like the acreage interesting, but that's not indicative of how much trail we have to work with. And the other thing is, if you look at the whole map, you can circle the entire North Branch Park and put that in the purple. So when you look at that comparison of the North Branch Park and this whole portion of the park, it is definitely not equitable. I would reflect also, it's also, I walk it almost daily. That is a rough, that is a harder trek, harder trail, harder area to walk in. I just respect that. I respect the decisions and the ideas about time blocks, maybe longer blocks. And I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but you sort of the brilliant 4 quadrants. You're absolutely right. It is not equal inconvenience. So I appreciate that there are other options, and I understand that the 2 to 4 isn't the one, but I don't think that this one is equitable either.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, let's hear from Linda Young, please.
Hey guys, first thanks for doing this. I know it's like even more contentious to deal with than potholes, so I appreciate the work everybody's putting into it. I've wrestled with this a lot. A lot of you know me, I have a dog. I've always had a dog of some sort, and I'm up there a lot. And I have a lot of, I feel like people who walk their dogs up there are actually often really active participants in helping to manage the park because we have our eyes on it a lot, so I think we're contributing. But I also, I don't love getting run into by other people's dogs. It's not my favorite thing. And I have friends who don't go to the park because they're scared of dogs. And so I've wrestled with this a lot. And I've asked myself over and over again, am I just feeling, am I just being entitled? Do I just want it my way? But the more I think about it, I actually think it is a question of equity. And I think that, we're all taxpayers one way or another, whether we're paying through our rent or directly through taxes. Almost none of us have our own back 40, right? So we have to share this resource, but one of the real important uses of it for a large portion of the population of the city is that it is essentially our back 40. And it is where we can go with our dogs and let them exercise in a natural way, and we can exercise in a natural way. In terms of things like, sorry, I'm going to check my notes here. I had a chance to use North Branch Park a bit last year because I have a puppy who was too young to go to Hubbard at the time. He had to be where there were fewer dogs. And I was like, wow, I haven't really spent time here, but it's great. North Branch is a great park, and it's all on leash. And it has a wonderful picnic shelter, and it has a playground for children, and a real playground. And it has a great flat trail for people who have some accessibility and mobility issues. They can walk all the way into the North Branch Nature Center too, and all around that field. It's got better wildlife preservation in many regards. And so I'd like to see this equity question addressed in a more holistic way, bringing North Branch Park into the picture. And I also want to be thinking about, we have, those of us who walk up there every day know that we have some very valued community members in this town. who are mobility challenged and or older and have dogs that they want to walk off leash, and it would be really hard for them to get into the northern section and use it regularly. I saw Alex note in his proposal about making improvements to the trails there. I think that's a really interesting proposal, and that would make me feel a lot better. But I'm wondering how quickly that could be done and what the impacts to wildlife would be if we went that route. So anyway, I'll leave it there. But I just, some of you have heard me talk about this before, so you know I've been all over the map. But the more I think about it, I just think equity is, it's not just about Hubbard. It's about the bigger picture.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, I see Cassandra Hemingway's hand next.
Hi, folks. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. One question, I'm just going to say them both, and then that's all I have to say. Would the Parks Commission, should you decide to implement the split of the park, would you be willing to wait until there is, you know, a more accessible trail in the northern part of the park and more parking and the kinds of things people have brought up? That's first question. And the second question is, along similar lines, have you considered doing something like this similar to a pilot project for, say, 6 months or a year, and then reassess to see how it worked out and how the park is being used?
Thank you, Cassandra. I don't think we're prepared. I'm certainly not prepared to speak for the commission in response to those questions, but I know that is what we're all curious about. And I know, especially what you mentioned about evaluating is something that's forefront of my mind. Does anyone else want to say anything?
Yeah, we did consider a pilot study last year when we were putting out the management plan, and we actually decided to go with the dog committee instead to get more data and more survey results. So it is something we've considered, but we do feel in general, you know, we've had some incidents recently in the park, and I think there is a sense of urgency to implement something.
Okay. Now we're about at 6:43, so a little bit more than 15 minutes left for comments. Okay, I saw this hand go up first in the room.
Suzanne Eikenberry. I live about 3 blocks from the park, from the Frog Pond side. I'm one of those people who does not have a dog, and I drive to North Branch to access the side of the park that currently has fewer dogs. And so the person who said there's an equality of inconvenience, I really appreciated that concept, because I think that my experience has been, I often walk up to the edge of the park and then turn around, that I see a lot of cars going up to the park with dogs, and I see very few pedestrians going up to the park with dogs. I think that the more car traffic shouldn't be part of the decision on north-south split. I'm really curious about if we flipped that north-south split and the north end plus North Branch Park was the on-leash section and the off-leash section was the Frog Pond section, if that would create that sense of equity that people are looking for. And I really appreciate the tone of respect that I hear from everybody, and the commitment to making it equal is really, it's lovely. It's different from previous conversations about dogs in the park I've experienced. I also want to thank the dog committee on one of their suggestions that I really appreciated was doing more education, like when you get your dog license. I would love to see the code of conduct strengthened to clarify that your dog has to be both in voice control and within sight line, because a big part of why we don't go is many off-leash dogs are fine, but you don't know when you see an off-leash dog what you're experiencing. And so few of the off-leash dogs have a clear owner in sight line of where I am their dog to the owner. And I think that that is really the bulk of what I want to say. I appreciate the ideas that came from Alec and from the Parks Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Did you want to go?
You want to do the online?
We'll take an online round here. Okay, have not yet heard from Beth Pombar.
Hey everyone. I just really want to also say so many thanks to everyone that has been working on this for so long. The one thing that, just an idea around the north-south split, what I don't hear in that proposal is like a really easy access point for just that quick, the dog park, the little dog park, right? Where people who aren't actually going to be able to go for a longer walk in the park can just get to that and at least let their dog run around there. We all know that puppies, when they're young, need socialization with other dogs to grow into being good dogs and to learn that park behavior. And some sort of very easily accessible, like small contained dog park area would also be a great asset. So if there was a longer walk that we had to go to for south for off leash, at least having that smaller section, which could be, I've lived in Montpelier for like 20 years, and this is the first time that I heard that what I always called the dog park up below New Shelter may be the ballpark. I've always called that very first thing off on across from the frog pond, the ballpark. Anyways, that would be a great space for that contained dog park that is just easily accessible, walking up from the meadows, and maybe doesn't connect to anything and is just a little bubble where there can be some off-leash dog stuff too. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Beth.
Everyone, I'm Brian Pfeiffer, and I live in the city. I will first confess to a lot of ignorance about these specific proposals because I've been traveling and not here at all for the last month and a half or so. So part of it's negligence on my part, and part of it's absence on my part. But I've lived in Montpelier for the better part of 40 years, and I'm a former Parks Commissioner and a Parks Commission chair who has been in the thick of this when it was really acrimonious. So I congratulate you first and foremost for how far you've gotten and how civil it's been and how wonderfully civil the discussion's been. But based on my limited knowledge of what I'm seeing so far, because I think you've got a great proposal here in the staff's recommendation. But from what I've heard, and I really came mostly to listen tonight, is I would suggest that you try and tinker around the edges to address some of these concerns about access and convenience. But I hope that you can stick with a zoned approach like this. And if anything, I'm owned by an English Shepherd named Odin, who is on leash and off leash. He's off leash where he can be safely off leash, and he's on leash where he needs to be on leash. And I would hope that you could, tinker with this zone proposal and make it work better for folks who have concerns. And just two other quick points are that. One is the surveys are great. We get a really good sense of opinion, but the ratios, like going with numbers on these surveys, just be cautious of that unless they were truly a representative sample and truly scientific surveys. And the other thing is the canine code of conduct. I wrote those little cards, the blue and green ones, and they're great. They're great, but it's true that having walked in this park for many years, that far too often still, I see a dog first with no keeper, with no guardian. And so that it's hard enough to enforce the code. And I'm not sure that we can do a lot of enforcement. I like to think that we can rely on the goodwill of most of us, and I think that's all we can do. That's what we can try our best to do. I don't know that we have the resources to let enforcement be an obstacle here. Lastly, I would still like, I got the point about inconvenience, shared inconvenience. I would just love to approach this as shared convenience and recognizing this is a park with many uses and many people who come for various reasons. I just want to see if there's a way that we can look at it, making people comfortable and making dogs comfortable as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. Becca Rulf.
Hello, thank you. And thanks to everyone that has been working on this. For many years, and thinking about it, as have I. I am currently a dog owner, and have a dog who does very much appreciate being off leash in the park. I've also had a dog who was reactive to other dogs, and I rarely went to the park because constantly telling people my dog's not friendly is not a very enjoyable way to spend time in the park, because you constantly feel a little bit like I have to keep saying my dog's not friendly, and she is, just not in certain circumstances. So, and I do see it from both ways, in terms of, the desirability of on leash and off leash. I've also done ski joring with my dog, which means that you're cross country skiing with your dog pulling you. And in that circumstance, you actually strongly prefer that other dogs are also on leash, because otherwise you can get kind of tied up in your own rope, which is not fun. Overall, I have a couple reactions to this proposal currently in place. Overall, I prefer a time-based solution. I've lived a number of places where there's on and off leash days, odd days versus even days. In some places, complemented based partly on days for mountain biking. Mountain biking and off leash dogs don't always go particularly well together. And I find the on and off leash days inconvenient, but not terribly challenging to overall access, and access from a variety of locations. One of the things that I think I bring uniquely to conversations sometimes is the transportation approach of someone who, I don't have a car in Montpelier. I'm not here full time. But my sister, who lives in Montpelier, is car free and also has never had a driver's license as an adult, or as a child for that matter, unfortunately. And so, many people who live near the park walk to the park. I would hate to see more driving to the park, from people who have perhaps specifically set up their life based on the idea and the choice that they want to be car free or car light. And people who live in other parts of Vermont certainly have not made that choice. So it's a kind of an upset of the status quo with regard to transportation. So that's one of the reasons that I prefer a time-based solution to a geographic solution. If there is to be a geographic solution, I would find it really odd to put the dogs off leash in the area of the park that has greater wildlife, including the deer yard, where we are already requested to leash up. And I would find that the more developed part of the park to be much more appropriate for off leash dogs than the northern part of the park. If a geographic split is to be further considered, I'd really love to see the maps so that we're talking about the same areas instead of having kind of these descriptions and you have to kind of construct the map in your head. And a geographic split, I think I would love to see more of an analysis, again, not just of the acreage, but of the types of resources. Could there be one shelter in each zone? The types of trails, easier walking versus harder walking, the lengths of trails. And so if a geographic split is to be further considered, I hope that the commission will do a little bit, maybe more of a slowdown of the process in order to do some of those types of analysis of the geographic split. But again, overall, I think a time-based solution is to be preferred, whether it's whole days or good chunks of days. But I guess I think the thing that's easiest is like a whole day on odd days and odd and even days in terms of on and off leash. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca. And I should have started with this, but we do have a map of the proposed leashed core area. And that's going to be on the front page of the commission's webpage on the city site under staff recommendation for changes to Hubbard Park's dog rules. And that's where you can find that line. So you don't have to try to etch it out in your head, but thanks for bringing that up.
It's also
Thank you.
And we've got hard copies in the room for those folks who are here.
And I dropped a link in the chat to a document with the map in it.
Thanks, Stephanie. All right.
Hi, my name's Rachel, and I'm a Montpelier resident. I also have been posting some information online and just want to mirror what I saw today, which is what I thought is a productive and successful public meeting. And I just want to encourage to continue these conversations. I think as you saw today, people are interested in a civil conversation about substantive matters. People do read the proposals that you put online. People have taken a lot of time and effort to fill out the surveys and to read your proposals. And so if you can trust the process and trust that people want to contribute productively to issues that impact their lives, such as how we spend our time and how we use the park, I think you can see that there will be productive outcomes. So I've heard on and off that people are concerned or scared that the public is going to attend a meeting, or like, what if the bridge comes to a meeting? I think that's fine. We're a community. We all want to live together. We want everybody to have a successful experience in the park. Nobody wants people to feel unsafe. I think we can all agree on those shared values. So let's just, I want everyone collectively pat ourselves on the back for having a productive conversation and realizing that it is possible. I also want to recommend that there could be more public process. I think another special meeting to hear from people would be productive and could be really helpful. I heard today that the chair of the Conservation Commission in her informal capacity had suggested some consultation with the Conservation Committee to understand the wildlife impacts in the northern area of the park. I think that would be a really important conversation. I also heard the Dog Committee, which has been reviewing this issue for months, is interested in some more space and time to review the proposal and to weigh in. And I think that that is a reasonable approach. So I just want to encourage the commission to consider all of the alternatives and the ideas that you heard today. I think it is really helpful when you update the website with real-time information. People obviously read it. They are very interested. And so if you have conversations behind closed doors and you don't put things in writing, you're not giving people an opportunity to substantively weigh in. And obviously people want to weigh in, but no one's trying to fight. This is not a dog fight. This is an actual public community conversation. So let's go for it. Let's have another meeting. Let's hear from people. And then what the result of that is a community-based solution that people feel like they had input in. And then you don't have to worry about policing people that are very unhappy to be banished to a northern part of the park. You'll have community buy-in. The off-leash dog users are there every day. And nobody wants to be in violation of some rule or feel like they're doing something that's that they're going to get in trouble. We want to follow the rules. We want to protect the park. We just need information. Let people contribute a solution. Let people weigh in on it. With my last second, I just want to say that I do support a time-based solution, but for me, that's less important than the public process. So just want to encourage you to lean into that. Don't shy away from it. This is part of our city government. This is how it works. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Okay, so we're closing out now. I do want to just make sure, in case anybody isn't clear with Parks Commission's rules, we can't meet outside of these public meetings. So we can't have a quorum outside of these meetings. So the conversations we're having and hearing tonight are the first time that we're able to do that together, and digesting the information as a commission has to happen in a publicly warned setting. I'm going to give the last comment to Sean Beckett here, and then we're going to wrap up for the night. So Sean, we got
Amelia also just recently raised there. I think that's
okay.
That's not an old hand.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We got two more comments. We got Sean and then Amelia, and then we're calling it.
Oh yeah. Thanks very much, everybody. Sean Beckett, live on Elm Street. I just wanted to echo something that the last speaker said. I work with North Branch Nature Center. My thoughts about this aren't reflective of the Nature Center, but one thing that's been really, really wonderful at the Nature Center is that over a span of several years, we began enforcing a dog policy there, and we were really concerned that it would be very difficult to enforce. But really, the community of dog walkers, the community of Montpelier, has really done a wonderful job of being able to self-enforce. And so I'm really hopeful and optimistic that that by coming up with a really clean and clear policy for Hubbard Park, yeah, our community is going to want to respectfully, toe that line. It's just been really beautiful to see that at the nature center. Is the leash law at the nature center enforced perfectly? No, certainly not. But it's been really smooth and easy, and I definitely see this community, especially after a meeting like this evening. I see this community being able to bring that up into Harvard Park as well, and as long as the rules are nice and clear and easy to enforce, easily signed, then I think it'll be our community has it in us to be able to do this. So yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for all your work.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, so I think Amelia, you've got the last word tonight, then we'll close this out.
Okay, hi, my name's Amelia Vath. My wife spoke earlier. I just want to say, as a dog owner, I've really appreciated being able to train my dog at Hubbard Park and teach her good trail etiquette. I also understand that it's my responsibility as a dog owner to be the one policing her behavior. So if she's not having a good day, she needs to be on a leash. I would like to see more folks keeping their dog on leash if they cannot be within sight and voice control, because often when we've been walking in the park, a dog without a human has approached us, and that's really difficult to police a dog that's not my own. That being said, I want to echo the sentiments of some folks who spoke earlier about sharing the inconvenience. I think if we look at the two parts of the park that we're talking about right now, we can all agree that they're not similar. They don't have similar trail systems. They're not equidistant to downtown, and they're not equally accessible. So I would also be for a zone and time split. And I just want to throw out there, I would be fine with making specific areas where folks like to congregate and have picnics completely on leash areas, such as the sledding hill and the pavilions. So yeah, thanks so much.
Hey, thank you, Amelia. Thank you, everybody. We did it. It's 7:03. I think we heard a lot tonight. I definitely starting to cramp up a little bit. It's all good information. We have the recording. Thank you. Yes.
One question.
Yes.
Stephanie in the chat said there's now going to be a meeting on the 16th.
Okay. Yeah, I was going there next. Thank you for the transition. 4/16. Yeah, so that's our next regularly scheduled meeting. I do not believe dogs are on the agenda, and we can check that. We have to take care of some other matters getting ready into the field season, so we need to hold that meeting free of this topic so we can make some decisions to let the park staff do what they need to do. And then 5/7, May 7th, Tuesday, will be a special meeting. Will be another hearing, another chance for public comment, followed by a vote that night. So please do attend all of our meetings. They're all public. Please do continue to reach out to us. Please do continue to digest this information. And is there anything else we missed?
A little caveat about the 4/16 meeting. Usually there's a public comment period at the beginning for topics that are not on the agenda. So if dogs are not on the agenda, you could come comment.
That's a fact. Okay, so I guess we'll
just set the agenda for that before, or should we just talk about that after? Like, do we need to do that during the meeting? We haven't actually set the agenda.
Right, we haven't set the agenda. Okay, but it will be posted.
Yeah, posted this week. So
within a couple of weeks. So
Did you say that we're going to try to make a decision?
we are. Yep, I did. Yeah. So we are going to be making a decision on May 7th for the record again, and hold ourselves accountable to making a decision. So with that, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.